Netanyahu will thrive if this war continues for another year. His politics will thrive. People will forget in Israel. Half of Israelis won't, but many would then take into account how he has resisted a ceasefire under the American pressures. He stood against the whole of the world. He was successful in pushing the international pressure away. These are things that people really like about him.
Welcome to Strat News Global. I'm Surya Gangadharan. The situation in Gaza is getting worse. Or was it worse earlier? It's hard to tell sometimes, given the level of violence that continues to escalate. Evacuation of civilians continues, deaths of civilians continues, and there is no end in sight to the fighting between Hamas and Israel. We also have Hezbollah firing a barrage of rockets at Israel over the weekend. Clearly, the situation is getting a lot worse and could be getting even worse going forward. I'm trying to look at the road ahead for Hamas. They have a new leader, Yahya Sinwar. What is he likely to do? What are his motivations? What does he want? I have with me Khinvraj Jangid. He's with the Jindal School of International Affairs. He was earlier at the David Ben Gurion University near Tel Aviv until fairly recently. Jangid, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Jangid, what is your sense of Hamas at this point? They have a new chief, Yahya Sinwar, who apparently understands Israel very well. And what strategy do you see so far in the continuing fighting going on? Is there a strategy? Is there something new that you see?
Well, Hamas is in a very interesting transition. Yahya Sinwar was their man looking after all of Gaza since the year 2017.
Yeah.
This is the one he took charge of Gaza in 2017. There are two very prominent people that we have known about Hamas, Khalid Mashal and Ismail Khania.
Yeah.
Now, Ismail Khania was apparently, by all guess, assassinated by the Israelis in the month of July. Khalid Mashal is a low-profile leader, but yes, Khalid Mashal and Ismail Haniyeh were the political faces of Hamas. It's hard to say they were moderate. We'll come to the
Hmm.
moderation in a while, but I think they had a greater international and regional outreach through their political offices in Doha. They lived in Doha, they operated from Doha, and Doha was their second home after Gaza. Assassination or the disappearance of Ismail Khanieh is a certain turning point in the history of Hamas. Ismail Khanieh did not change the position of Hamas when it comes to accepting the two-state solution. Hamas still has a charter. There was a moderation in the year 2007 and 8. In 17, also, there was an attempt to redefine the charter of Hamas, which talks about the liberation of the whole of Palestine. So it doesn't, when it came in response to the Oslo peace process. Oslo peace process started in the late 80s and early 90s when Yasser Arafat, after doing what Hamas does now, targeting Israeli civilians, using violence against the state and its people as well as its soldiers. When he accepted the two state solution, there was a great moment of political evolution of the Palestinian national movement, and he shifted the Palestinian national movement from resistance to an international partner for peace. Right at that time, Islamic Brotherhood of Egypt gave birth to this radical Islamic thought in the territories of Gaza, where the Palestinian national movement was redefined as a religious call. Yasser Arafat was a very remarkable leader. So he could juggle with Marxist guerrillas,
Hmm.
the religious, the secular. But more or less, if you look at his political leadership and the Palestinian national movement, he was fairly modern political resistance person who could define the question of Palestine as a question of self-determination
Yeah.
and sovereignty in modern terms, not in religious terms. He always distrusted the religious movements of the Middle East, and he never associated himself with any Islamic thought.
Yeah.
He himself was a very, let's say, non-practicing Muslim. So I think when he moderated the whole of the Palestinian national movement, Hamas came as a radical, more extremist. So naturally, they had to reject all of what he was doing.
Yeah.
Fact, one of the reasons Yasser Arafat had cold feet in the Oslo peace process, he feared his own assassination by the radicals of Hamas for signing the Oslo peace process. So Hamas came up with this radical position. Ismail Khania was considered somebody who could now move to the next stage. That didn't happen, maybe because in 2006, when Hamas won the elections within the Palestinian territories, the world did not accept Hamas as a fair Palestinian entity. Though the world, I mean, when I say world, the American and the Europeans, they put a demand to Hamas in 2006 that you have won, but we will not recognize you unless you accept the two-state solution and you renounce the violence against the state of Israel. Now, I think when Hamas won in 2006, I think it was too early for them to redo completely their ideology. So I think, Tony Blair, British Prime Minister, who I really personally think is a very reflective person, he apologized for two things when he was the Prime Minister or the British politician. A, for joining the war on terror with George Bush.
Yeah.
He thinks that it was a great blunder on his part to go that way. A war on terror was a disaster. Second thing that he regretted on record, by the way, is that in 2006, Europe and America should have given more time to Hamas. Because what happened in 2006, Hamas was really considered an alternative which could have, let's say, improved the Palestinian national choices. But when Hamas was asked point blank, you renounce the violence and you renounce your charter, then we accept you as a legit Palestinian entity. I think that was too much of a on the face
Yeah.
demand. It didn't happen. So what Hamas remained a terrorist organization. Hamas is still a terrorist organization for most of the Western world.
Yeah.
Uh, and that has pushed Hamas into more radical, uh, let's say, positions. Now, Yahya Sinwar, personally, is very, very different man than many of the Hamas leaders. In fact, people don't consider him a leader. He's at best a guerrilla fighter. That he
Okay. A
doesn't
military
have,
commander.
that he's a military, he's simply a commander. He doesn't have leadership qualities. He has not led the movement beyond the limited territory of Gaza. He doesn't have any interpersonal skills to form regional solidarities or alliances. All that work was done by people like Ismail Khania and Khalid Mashal. So Yahya Sinwar is just a commander, and his sole, let's say, currency right now is the fact that he could attack Israel the way he did on October 7th. Now, that made him very, let's say, unusual fighter in the ranks because nobody could really imagine, nobody could really plan so well ahead in time. Nobody could have thought it's even possible, and he did it from Hamas's point of view. Even if
Yeah.
it's a violence that's completely, brutal and inhuman, and could be easily termed as terror, acts of terror.
But tell me, Jangid, how badly has Hamas been degraded by the war? It's now 10 months. Has it been militarily degraded, as some claims there?
It is. See, it's true that a lot of their fighters have been killed, including somebody like Mohammed Daif. Mohammed Daif
Yeah,
is considered
yeah.
very high in the ranks. In fact, he's one of the best men around Yahya Sinwar in Gaza. Very famously, he was called engineer. He was a very
Hmm.
mathematical man, extremely good at engineering and technological, savviness. Out of 40,000 people that have died in Gaza, half of them are Gaza, Hamas fighters.
My gosh.
So yes, a lot of their men have been killed. But here is the thing: Hamas, as a movement or as an thought, looks this as a part and parcel of their long-term struggle. So for them, the thought and the idea still survives. Now they have more reason to mobilize and radicalize the youth of Gaza. So they will get another 20,000 men in 2 years easily. So in a way, it's a Israeli facade of narrative that we degraded Hamas to a certain
Yeah.
extent. It's not a degradation. You just killed men who will be easily replaced by
Mm.
others, and
Mm.
now imagine the youth who saw their families devastated, killed
Yeah.
in brutal manner by Israeli army in Gaza. They would have no reason to not fight. I mean, it's an easy fodder for any militant organization. A war like Gaza is the best moment to galvanize the masses in their favor.
So, when you look at it, this entire talk of ceasefire and all, is it your sense that this has kind of faded into the background? We've had a lot of frenzied activity, nothing got anywhere.
Yeah, it wouldn't get anywhere. For some time, I wrote a couple of times about this. The world wants a deal. Joe
Yeah.
Biden wants the deal. Everybody wants the deal, but not necessarily two parties.
Yeah.
Here, Hamas doesn't see a deal, a possibility of any other than its, irrelevance. If Hamas signs the deal, there would be an Arab or international force taking care of Gaza. Hamas will have
Hmm.
to then have no reason to shoot rockets. Hamas will have to abide by principles that it doesn't believe in. Where does that take Sinwar? Sinwar is more interested in escaping and evading Israeli army, which he did remarkably, by the way. For 10 months, the man seems extremely ahead of the Israeli army and regrouping his battalions. He cannot regroup his battalion and inspire people to fight if he signs the ceasefire deal.
Yeah.
For him, he has won the battle in three ways. One, by attacking Israel on October 7th, the way he did. Second, evading capture or death for 10 months, being in Gaza. Third, not letting hostages free. He has more than 100 Israelis still in his captivity. These are three big achievements from his point of view. And so he doesn't. Why would he want a deal? The Netanyahu, on the other hand, also is somebody who is highly insincere about the deal. He keeps talking about it under the American pressures. But if you look at all his decisions and actions, including the assassination of Ismail Khania in Tehran, which is very self defeating. I mean, it doesn't
Yeah.
help the causes of Israel, it doesn't help the cause of the deal and the ceasefire. Apparently, Joe Biden was very furious. He spoke on the call just after that, and he told him, "Do not bullshit me," quote unquote. And I think Netanyahu will thrive if this war continues for another year. His politics will thrive. People will forget in Israel the half of Israelis won't, but many would then take into account how he has resisted a ceasefire under the American pressures. He stood against the whole of the world. He was successful in pushing the international pressure away. These are things that people really like about him. His core voters, that he stands very firm against international opinion, international organizations, American pressure, particularly the pressure that comes from the Democrats. You should see there is a full war going on against Kamala Harris
Hmm.
in the Israeli press and in the right wing Israeli groups. They are already counting how she's anti-Israel for decades, how she's not going to be the best person in America. So they are already preparing the ground for Trump. So they have taken a position. Many of the cabinet ministers in Netanyahu's government have taken a position in favor of Trump, which usually doesn't happen. You keep quiet till the time
Yeah.
elections
Hmm.
are coming. But so what I think is that the propaganda and the misinformation and the rhetoric will really thrive for Netanyahu if this war continues for a while. Now, he needs to have serious, uh, let's say, struggle within Israel with the people who are protesting, with the families of the hostages. Army is also fighting him. A
Hmm.
month back, Galant spoke officially on record to the Defense and Security Committee of the Parliament, where he said claim of a total victory is nonsense.
Yeah.
He,
Absolutely.
in a way,
Yeah.
said this about his own prime minister. And just after it, prime minister came out very against him and he said he should stop talking anti-Israel. So imagine the defense minister is attacked by the prime minister in the middle of the
Yeah.
war. So I think the army is much bigger challenge for Netanyahu than the outside world
Hmm.
or the pressure for the deal.
But the army will not. I mean, do you see the army commanders revolting against Netanyahu? Do they? What are they saying?
So there are three powerful positions in Israel: the defense minister, the head of Mossad, and head of Shin Bet,
Okay. Hmm.
and the chief of staff who's very anti Netanyahu. All these four men are considered on one side. For month, almost for 2 months, the internal reports and the news in Israel is that these four men are the only hope to get rid of Netanyahu from power
Hmm.
because the public pressure doesn't work. The right
Hmm.
wing coalition seems very well knitted. Nobody wants to really see the fall of the government. They
Yeah.
say if there is a ceasefire, we will withdraw from the government, but that's just for the sake of saying. The right wing coalition will not let the government fall. Joe Biden has tried a lot. He cannot pressure more than what he has done. So, where does that leave the whole scene of Netanyahu and his forces? It's only the four people who can really force him to come to terms with a political decision. My sense, the way I when I was there in Israel for 4 years, I saw the defense minister going against the prime minister for the democracy protest, then the whole country shutting down,
Yeah.
including
Hmm.
the airport. I see that that will be the last thing, and it's likely to happen.
So Netanyahu is still not out of the woods. Is that what you're
He's
saying?
not out of the woods, yes, because he has many senior decision makers who are against him. I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, there was a cartoon, actually a newspaper poster in Israel against the chief of his staff. Now, chief of his staff is a senior most position during the war or peace. But the right wing newspaper carried a poster against him with his face on it, responsible for October 7. So inside Israel, the within the right wing, they're trying to blame the army for October 7 and then
Hmm.
push these four opposing men out of decision making. I'll give
Sideline
you
them.
another very interesting fight. Just 7 days back, head of Shin Bet gave a formal report to the parliament and the prime minister where he used the word called Jewish terrorism. This is a report, very serious report. Outside world did not talk much about it. Shin Bet is the one that monitors whole of West Bank and occupied territories, and they said the settlers' violence, the ransacking, the attacks that the settlers
Yeah.
are doing on Palestinian villages or the common Palestinians here and there is the most dangerous threat to the Israeli security. And he used the word Jewish terrorism. That's a serious charge on the right wing
Yeah.
politicians because the right wing politicians often support the maximalist extremist in the settlers movement.
Hmm.
So I see a more civil war kind of a situation within Israel where the army is actually fighting a very, very powerful part of the government as well as 500,000 population that lives in the settlements. And then you have the Netanyahu and his fight against the defense minister going on.
My God. And society is itself divided.
So Israeli society has been divided for a long time. This is what
Hmm.
actually everybody was writing in the year 2021 and 22. The people in favor of the democracy and the people in the favor of judicial reform
Hmm.
were the people of the right and the left. Not left in the sense that we understand, but left in the sense that they are centrist, pro two-state solution, pro market, free market economy, very conservative. So in a IR sense. But these are the people who said we need to just move on with a strong state and democracy. And then you have a right-wing nationalist religious parties which don't support a secular and a modern democratic idea of the state, do not necessarily believe in the free market economy. They believe in the welfareism and subsidies and all kind of exemptions from taxes. And they wanted the country to be more Jewish and religious.
Okay.
So that division between religious and non-religious, between nationalist and pluralist, between the pro-peace and anti-peace, between those who believe in the international standing of Israel and those who say, well, Jews always had world against them, so what is new in this world? Now, what has happened is that in such a serious crisis in the country, those divisions have become unbridgeable.
Hmm.
And that's the reason um, Netanyahu, in a way, survives after the October 7th kind of a tragedy and a failed war of 10 months. Let's look at it technical. Like any prime minister or a head of the state will have to resign for what happened on October 7th,
Absolutely. Yeah, he
or,
hasn't.
or what war he waged, a war that has not even got the hostages free, a
Yeah.
war that has gone completely empty in terms of its objectives in Gaza. And the guy doesn't think he needs to take responsibility because he has this one part of Israel almost like granted to him. So he sits in the middle of those divisions and enjoys a very strong advocacy, not because they really believe in him, it's just that he is the successful person of their camp. Without him, the right wing nationalist religious parties will not win.
So, last question. Given the current situation where the war appears to be moving into Lebanon, you had all these drone attacks, retaliation by the Israelis. You think that's the next stage of this war? A broadening of the conflict into Lebanon?
I don't think so. I personally think that Iran will not have any interest in in a regional war, in a full war with Israel, which means Hezbollah will not do that either. I
Okay.
think Hezbollah has been targeting strategically the north of Israel to keep the pressure on Israel for a ceasefire deal, for creating a complete instability in the country. Imagine 80,000 to 100,000 people of north of Israel are homeless for the last 10
Yeah.
months. They've not been
Yeah.
able to
True.
return to their homes. That's a serious loss of sovereignty
I
for
know.
the state of Israel. So
Yeah.
I think Hezbollah achieved what it could even achieve as a one-armed group. A full war is not in their favor. They talk about taking revenge for Fawd, Shukr, or Ismail Khania, but those are just rhetorics for the sake of keeping their ideological groups, um, inspired.
Hmm.
They cannot go mum suddenly on these slogans, but they will not find a full scale war in their favor, strategically speaking. So all of these are like, a chutput ladai. I mean, a small scale war, partly proxy, partly direct, just to keep each other under pressure of each other. It's just a power tactic, just to be relevant within your own constituency. So
Yeah.
when Netanyahu did this preemptive strike, he got a great speech to make yesterday, saying, "Look, we can decide and carry on a serious amount of a strike upon Hezbollah inside Lebanon." And it's true, they took into Lebanon more than 100 fighter jets.
Yeah.
That's huge amount of intrusion. So I
Yeah.
think he got to say, well, I'm not going to leave Hezbollah as well. So he keeps his rhetoric. Hezbollah is keeping its own rhetoric, but I don't think any of them will push for a full scale war. It's not in their favor. But I really want to go back to what you said about Hamas. I think Hamas is at a very critical junction. Recently, China did a mediation. By
Yeah.
the way,
Yeah.
I think there was no coverage about it, but imagine there was a one mediation between Hamas and Fatah in Beijing
Yeah.
2 months back.
Two of them. Two of them, in fact.
It was a significant news
Yeah.
because Hamas and Fatah are also, in a way, not accepting each other.
Yeah.
So if Hamas will accept Fatah, it would be a moderate position. But now, after Ismail Khania's death, I see Yahya Sinwar doing that least likely. He wouldn't do that. He would take Hamas in a very, very radical position.
Very interesting. So, what we are going to see is perhaps continued war without end, it would appear. The politics, of course, of Netanyahu wanting to persist with the war, and no resolution of the hostage issue, and Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, the other players continuing to do what they're doing, again, with no real end in sight. Jangid, great talking to you, and
Thank
as
you.
always, a pleasure. Thank you very much, and looking forward to more such conversations going forward.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. That's all we have for you on this edition of Strategies Global's Gist. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media. Thank you very much. Goodbye.